morning, everybody. My name's Chef Keith. Carrie just introduced me. And today, the first technique we're going to start with today is going to be braising. So you're going to learn how to braise. And then we're going to roll into a scalloped potato. There are recipes available in the handout that Carrie was just showing you. So if you want to follow along with that handout, I believe it was also emailed to you. The first thing we're going to get started with is the meat. What I like to use when I'm doing a braised dish is, you might have heard if you've seen any of my classes in the past, is you want to use something like a chuck. Chuck is one of the best braising meats. You can use eye round, you can use sirloin, but it tends to be a little dry. It'd be nice and tender, but it'd be a little bit more dry. I don't like the texture so much, but you can still use it. So we're going to go ahead and get started. The chuck I get is a little bit different than what you're going to have in the store, but essentially it's the same, from the same cut of meat. It's from the shoulder and the neck. So this is what mine looks like. We're going to go ahead and get the saute pan ready. We're going to get that nice and hot. When it comes to searing stuff, I like to get my pan a little warm and then add my fat, which could be oil, or you could use clarified butter, olive oil. You do definitely want to use a higher searing, a higher burning radius type of oil. Avocado oil, coconut oils, that type of stuff. I personally don't like to use the olive oil like you see a lot of. If you get it a little too hot, then it does burn easier, but it's also toxic after 260 degrees. So if you're doing a simple saute, olive oil is fine, but you don't want to go too high like we're going to go to get some nice color on this. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm just going to cut this a little bit and we're going to brown it on each side. I do have a sample ready to go. So we're just going to take these few pieces here. We're going to season those up with a little salt and pepper on all sides. While I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to salt my steak that we're going to do. We're going to do a steak au pois. It's a very classic dish. A little salt and pepper. You don't want to put pepper on that. So we're just going to salt and pepper this so it sears to the meat. So you get the flavor of that when you're eating it. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with a little bit of oil. I'm using a little canola oil. We're going to get that a little hot. And then a good way to test your pan, if it is hot or not, what you want to do is always use tongs, but I'll put it in the pan and I'll slide it. If I feel no give, then that means that your pan is pretty hot and it's not going to stick. Another technique, you put it down and give it a shake. You see that it's going to move around like it just did and spin around. You're good. You're nice and hot. And that's kind of where you want to go. And you want to start it hot, and then you want to turn it down just a tad so you don't burn your oil also. We're gonna leave them alone. We're gonna let them do their little magic there. Another thing, I think I'm gonna hold off on adding anymore. You don't want to crowd your pan. You'll do it in batches. If you crowd your pan, moisture is gonna come out of your meat, obviously. And then it's going to start to steam your meat, and you don't want that. It's going to just make the meat gray. Then you're going to get sticking problems. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this cutting board. And it really shouldn't take too long, but you do want to brown each side. And then if you can see in this pan, it's already starting to develop what we call fond. It's what's the brown bits that you always hear about at the bottom of the pan or on the pan. And that's what we're going to deglaze with. And you can deglaze with a beef broth, sweet water if you want. But we're going to go ahead and deglaze with a little bit of Marlowe. It's going to add a really nice depth of flavor with the finished product.
Dark red wine.
And so while I'm waiting for this to brown, I'm gonna add just a touch more oil, and then I'm gonna give it a flip. Go ahead and flip those over. So I don't know if you can see that. It's nice golden brown. Not only that's going to add some really nice flavor to your meat, but it's also going to kind of hold it together and make it look a little better than just a gray meat. So if you didn't brown it, that's kind of what you would end up with. So we're just going to let it do its thing. I'm going to turn it down just a touch so we're not burning it. Give it another shake. We're not sticking. We're good there. And I'm not quite sure if you can see in here. So I do have a finished product here. And what I like to do is this would be kind of what you would consider a pot roast type of dish right here. And so when I'm doing something like this, I don't let any of the vegetable really go to waste that's in here. So I'll pick out my potatoes. You'll put your potatoes, that's your starch. I'll use my carrots. They're so lovely. They absorb a lot of the beef flavor. Even your celery is so delicious when you're doing this. So what I typically do is you'll pull all your meats out, all your vegetables out, and you'll use this lovely broth as your sauce. And what I like to do is I'll pull it all out, I'll strain it, put it in a pot, you reduce that by half, and oh my goodness, you're gonna have some great flavor there. So I'm just gonna set this aside for right now. This is what my product looked like before that. So this is all raw. And I'm going to go ahead and rotate this. As you can see, we're getting a nice golden brown here. I'm going to put this on their end. Get a nice brown color. At the same time, you want to move it around to a new spot. You want to build up the fond on your pan because that's all the love, all the really good flavors that you're going to get in there. And then, while you're waiting, what I'll do is I'll take a couple cloves of garlic. We're going to leave them whole. We're just going to give them a gentle smash. Throw it right in there. I'm going to throw some in here, but I'm also going to throw a little bit in there to start developing the base flavor of your sauce that you're going to finish with. So I'm going to save a couple of these little ones for the sauce. I'll grab a couple more here. So I've got your basic mirepoix, is what it's called, with carrot, celery, and onions. We usually do this kind of with a full class, so I wish I could ask people if you have ever done this, or are you familiar with deglazing? I'm going to set that on my way. Oh, why I'm here. I have a little bit of rosemary sprig. It's going to give you a really nice earthy flavor and some fresh thyme. And you just throw that in there. Now, if you wanted to get real fancy, you could do a bouquet garni, where you would put this in some cheesecloth and you would tie it up, pop it in there, and just pull that whole thing out. And you don't have any leaves or stems that are in there. But that's why in my world, I just strain everything through a fine mesh strainer. So I think we're going to be about ready to go ahead and see that really nice golden crust. Oh, that's just going to be great. And you see how I'm kind of changing locations. It's going to be a hotter location, but it's also building all that flavor. And at this point is where I'm going to go ahead and add my garlic to that. So just a little bit of garlic. We're going to saute that for a little bit. We're almost done to hit it with some red wine. Get a little bit of color on your garlic too. I see we're almost there. And then what we're going to do, we're going to add this beef. We're going to deglaze, and we're going to add that juice to here. And then we have some beef broth. And you don't want to necessarily submerge your meat all the way. I kind of like to put it on top of the vegetables, that it pop it out of the broth a little bit, and you don't have to have so much. Here's my example here. Can they see inside here? Okay. So where I started is my liquid was all the way up to here. And if you can see, it reduced already by half in here. And then when you strain that out and you keep reducing it, that's what gives it such a really, really depth of flavor. So you can see my garlic. you can see my garlic, it's nice and browning on there. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull my meat out. It's all nice and browned all the way around.
So Keith, at home, if you don't have a hotel pan, what type of pan would you
A
put
9 by 13 or a 9 by 9, depending on how many people you're trying to serve.
Did you use a Dutch oven?
This is, you could use your Dutch oven. And then at that point, you put everything in your Dutch oven. You'll deglaze like I'm getting ready to. And then you'll just pour your deglazing liquid into your Dutch oven. And why I say that is I don't like to use pots to sear my meats when I'm doing this, because then your liquid or the liquid that comes out of your meat doesn't have anywhere to escape, so therefore you have better chances of it steaming. So I like to use pans. I'll deglaze, use that pan, and then I'll put everything in, and that's where you're going to get this really nice color there. So we're going to hit this a little bit of red wine. And at this point, you can keep reducing your wine. It's going to get sweeter. The more you reduce, especially like a Merlot, it's amazing. You can reduce it so much that it turns into a pancake syrup. It tastes like grape syrup. It's so flavorful. I'm not going to reduce it because I want to keep that wine flavor there. And then sometimes I'll even finish my sauce with just a sip. Now, this is where you're going to cover your veg, especially your potatoes, but you don't want to really submerge your meat all the way down inside. You want to try and leave any of the flavor of the meat inside, which essentially is blood. It won't be blood anymore when you braise this. So I'm going to go about halfway up, just over the potatoes. Right there. And then, of course, you're going to want to put a little salt and pepper in there. Whoops, sorry. A little salt and pepper. There's your salt. Your pepper. And then you would put a little tin foil on top of this. You'd wrap it up, put it in your oven at 300 degrees. Cook it for about an hour and a half to 2 hours. You know it's done when you can reach in. Right now it's super tough. When you reach in to your pan, and you can easily just pull a little chunk off. It looks beautiful. And this technique is used essentially, pretend the carrots and celery was green chilies and peppers for your Mexican style foods. So if you're doing, say, machaca or something like that, it's the same thing, just different kinds of levels of flavor. So we're going to go ahead and pretend that this is going in my little oven over here. We're going to set that aside. And the next thing that we're going to go ahead and get started with is our scalloped potatoes with the recipe that you have today. So the scalloped potatoes, I did pre-cut these, and anytime they're going to sit for any length of time, you always want to soak them in some water, and then you'll drain your water off. Okay, now scalloped potatoes sounds kind of difficult or fancy, but they're really super duper easy. So I already pre-peeled these and I pre-sliced most of them. But what I like to do when I am using my peeler and I know I'm going to be cutting a potato is I'll take one end and I'll give it a couple extra peels on one side so it's a little flat and doesn't roll around on you. If you see how unstable that can be, but you go to this side and it's nice and stable, but you still hold your shape. So we're going to go ahead and cut this right about a 1/4 inch thick. You can go super thin if you'd like. You can go thicker into big chunks kind of like that. It's up to you, whatever you'd like, but the thicker, the longer it's going to take to cook. So we're just going to go ahead and slice. And what I like to do, especially with potato, is sometimes they'll stick to your knife. So I'll just slice through it, push it aside, slice through it, push it aside. And then you'll notice it won't stick. If you have a really sharp knife, sometimes it won't. But when you're doing lots and lots of them, it will stick because you get starch on your knife. And what I do is I have a bucket of water and just hit it in the water a little bit and it stops sticking. So I'm going to go ahead and do this real quick. Get these sliced up. And then when you're building your scalloped potatoes, you can get all fancy and you can shingle them into your baking dish. Or you can stack them and have them all in stacks. So let me get, we're gonna show you how to build that real quick. Now, what I have over here is I have my heavy cream and my half and half that I've already warmed up. I have my baking dish, so I pre-cut my leek. I'll get back to the leeks and the jalapenos. Those are another one I can show you a little bit easier ways to clean those up. You definitely want to pan spray this, so you'll spray all pans or all the sides and the pan at the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put my heavy cream in my milk that I've warmed up. It will reduce and thicken as it cooks in the oven. When you take the tin foil off, some of that moisture is going to reduce and evaporate. And then it will thicken again once you pull it out and let it rest. I do have a finished product here. So for right now, we're going to go ahead and put our potato slices right into the heavy cream. This is essentially just kind of get everything mixed up. All right. I won't be using all these potatoes. It's about 4 pounds of potatoes, which on your average potato, it's about 6 potatoes. We're going to set that aside. We'll go ahead and add these to it. Now we're going to go ahead and clean the jalapenos. I always recommend you don't want to forget, when you're working with jalapenos especially, you touch your skin and it's going to burn. So I don't forget. I just wear gloves. It's horrible. You get an itch on your eye and you scratch your eye and next thing you know, you're crying. And there's a couple different ways, but I'm going to show you the easiest way that I found when it comes to doing a minced jalapeno and how to seed it. You want to go ahead and just cut the tip off. Cut it right down the middle. I like to use a spoon, and that way you'll get all the veins out. Now, if you like spice, don't get rid of any of that. Like, personally, I love spicy food, but my family does not. So what I'll do is I'll lay your jalapeno down, pull forward, and you'll see a lot of the vein. The vein is actually the hottest part. A lot of people say it's the seeds. That's not a true fact. It's the veins, because that's what the seeds grow onto. Flip it around, get the rest of the vein out of there, set that aside, go into the other half, get your seed out of there. And then I'm going to show you another way. Some other people will do this. They'll cut the tip off, and then with your knife, kind of like if you were working a diced onion. So you're kind of, in a way, starting the dicing process on this type of technique. And at this point, you have your jalapeno with your seeds. Then you just kind of cut the vein and the jalapeno with the seeds away, and you end up with that. So whatever you're more comfortable with. But personally, I like to do it this way, and then you'll just push it flat, and then you'll do what you call a julienne. And when you're using your knife, use your blade. Don't cut straight down. That's why you'll see a lot of chefs going in the motions like this. So what I do is I'll julienne all of it, and then I'll come back and I'll dice it all. So you just push down again. And then you'll make a nice little stack out of that. And you're wanting a mince, but again, you can add more jalapeno if you like it spicy. Don't clean it up, cut them bigger. But the bigger it is, the longer it's going to take to cook. You would just want the kind of the flavor of the jalapeno there. Same with the leeks. And you can use green onions. You don't have to use leeks. remember folks, recipes are just the starting point. Sometimes when I find a new recipe I like, I'll follow the recipe, I'll taste it, and then I'll make my own changes to it. Now, if you're not real familiar with leeks, I didn't find a really good example for you, but sometimes when you'll cut it in half, and this is what it looks like when it's whole. And most of the time you don't want to use a whole lot of the greens. Only if you were going to use any of the greens, it would be towards the bottom here. This just gets really, really tough unless you were to say braise it. But usually, sometimes when you cut into a leek, you'll see a bunch of dirt in there. So you either rinse that under the sink, or you can soak it in a bowl for a little bit and give it a nice shake, change that water out. But I got fortunate enough that this was a really clean leek. And I just do the same thing with this. So I'll cut it in half. And then we'll julienne it, is what when you're making sticks out of it. Roll it over. And now we're going to put those all in line just like the jalapeno. And we're going to do a small dice, almost a mince. I do have some I already pre-did right here just to save a little time today. Put that there. So everybody in the pool, okay? Everybody in the pool. So we've got our jalapenos, we have our leeks, our heavy cream, our milk, or our half and half, I'm sorry. And I was just demonstrating this, so we don't need this jalapeno that I'm working with here. And we have our cheese. And you can use cheddar, of course, any kind of cheese that you like, but you do want a flavorful cheese. You want to really taste it. Parmesan, smoked Gouda is really super good. We're going to go ahead and dump all of our cheese in there. And we're just going to give it a little toss. And when we put this in this pan, you're going to go, that doesn't seem like quite enough liquid. Remember, potatoes are full liquid. Don't add any more, or you will end up with soupy. But that's an easy fix. You just poke a hole in your tin foil, pour a little out of the corner, and it's an easy fix. And let it rest. Let it rest. When it comes to scalloped potatoes, like I said, they will thicken. Can you see inside this pan here? So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to go ahead and shingle this, and then we're going to pour that sauce right on top. We'll wrap it with saran wrap, tin foil, and then we will put it in the oven and bake it at 350 degrees.
Keith, if somebody can't find heavy cream, is there a way to use whipping cream?
That's what you're using. Heavy cream is sometimes, I don't know if it's marketing or what, but it says heavy whipping cream. Sometimes it just say heavy cream. So don't use the aerosol, or don't go using your Miracle Whip or your, what's it called?
Yeah.
You know,
Ready Whip.
Yeah, Ready Whip. No, that's not the right.
Cool Whip, Cool Whip.
Yeah, Cool
No,
Whip.
Cool
There
Whip.
you go. Yeah, you don't want to use your Cool Whip, but yeah. So if you see a thing that says heavy cream and heavy
It's in a
whipping
carton
cream,
generally.
right. The heavy, sometimes the fat content is just a little difference, but you won't know the difference. And that is where it thickens. So if you did just say with just milk, half and half is milk and heavy cream. So, but the heavy cream and the half and half is why this is going to thicken after it cooks. At 350 degrees is just over, 212 is boiling point. It's a little tiny bit different in an oven, but 350 degrees, when you take your saran wrap off or your tin foil, you'll see your corners are boiling just a little bit, or simmering, I should say.
And Chef, what about creme fraiche?
Creme fraiche is actually a sour cream. So creme fraiche is a fancy name for homemade sour cream. And no, you would not want to use that. You can add sour cream to this mix. Like when I make mine for you folks, I do sour cream and green onions, and I'll make my sauce and thicken it up, and but no, not creme fraiche, just creme fraiche in replacement of your heavy cream. So if you want to add a little sour cream flavor to this, by all means, add it to your liquid. So we're just gonna kind of, and if you see I'm shingling that up, and I'm gonna do the 2 layers of that. And so that way it's gonna look a little bit fancy, and you can even get fancier. You can use a oval baking dish or a round, and you can go in a nice swirl, and it'll look really nice for your guests when they come over. And you just put that on the table, they'll be blown away. And it's just simple little things like that to make the experience a little better for your guests and make them think that you're Julia Childs in the kitchen.
I've got a question. What's the difference between scalloped potatoes or potatoes au gratin?
Potatoes au gratin and scalloped potatoes is one is mainly going to have more cheese and more cheese based. And then the other one is going to have like what we have here, the scallop. And then the au gratin is where it browns nice on top. And normally you would take some breadcrumbs and finish it on top. When I do that type of system, I like to take some olive oil or even some clarified butter, and I'll toss my breadcrumbs in that and then spread it, and you will get an amazingly evenly browned top. So the au gratin is kind of left that crispy part on the top. And then I hope we have a little bit extra time today, and I was going to show you a nice fine dining way to plate these types of potatoes up and really impress your guests. So as soon as I'm done here, we're going to move on to the next recipe, and I hope when I'm done with the class, we'll touch base a little bit on plate design and plating. Now we're just going to pour all this liquid right on top. There we go, and I'm going to go ahead and top it with a little more salt and pepper. You notice in the recipe there was a little white pepper in this mix, is what I added when I warmed it. I like to put just a little bit more on top. And then this is where you would saran wrap it, tin foil it, pop it in the oven, your preheated oven at 350 degrees for 45 minutes. Or when you take, say, a fork or a toothpick, kind of like checking a cake, you poke it through and your potato is nice and tender. You don't want it too mushy. You don't want it to, your guests when they come over for dinner, have it just like this, to be like they're eating, mashed potatoes that looks like a scalloped potato. So if you'll see, it kind of looks like a lot of fluid, but really it's not. It will absorb, and when it rests and cools, it will thicken. So that just went in the oven. Let's give it 45 minutes and then we'll come back to that. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and we're going to go over a technique of doing a steak au pois, which is a fancy name for a peppercorn sauce, but generally it's with cognac. So one for the chef, one for the dish, one for the chef, one for the dish. Okay, so what I did when I salted this is what it does is it's going to release some of the moisture out of there. And you want to dab that off to get really nice color on meats when you're searing them. But you want to make sure they're real dry. You don't want to push on it, just dab it dry. And what that salt did is it took out some of that moisture to help you get a better color. So I'm just kind of dabbing that dry. Now the fun part. So what I have here is I have my peppercorns. I put in a freezer bag or a Ziploc bag. We're going to lay that down, kind of flatten it out a little bit, and then I'll flip my bag over so we don't get so many holes in the bag. And we're just going to give it a nice punch. If you have a pepper grinder on the bottom or sometimes on the top, if the screw is top, you can actually adjust your grind that you're going to get. So I'm going to loosen this up a little bit, and we'll do a little sample there. So I almost unscrewed it all the way. And when you start to grind it, you're going to get a little more cracked pepper. So if you see those chunks, and I'll show you a quick sample too. We're going to tighten that back up. So we're going to tighten that up. And now it's going to be a finer pepper that's going to come out. You'll see a big difference. So I don't know if you can see
Yeah.
this see the difference.
Mhm.
So that's what's nice about having a good pepper grinder. You don't have to go through this. Or if you have a spice grinder, like a coffee grinder that you always use and you're familiar with the kitchen. So I'm just going to take my tenderizer. I want to hit it pretty hard because the peppercorns are pretty hard. Have some over here. I'm just kind of demonstrating the technique of using your bag. And what I like to do is I'll do a batch of this, put it in an airtight container and save it for the next time. Airtight is important because a fresh pepper, once you crush it up, it's gonna lose, and you leave it in a container just open, it's actually gonna lose some of its flavor more than you'd think. So I'm gonna give it a couple more pounds and then we're gonna move on to this recipe. Let's see, I double bagged it for a reason. I don't know if you can see that, but there are a lot of little holes. That's why I typically don't really care for this type of system, but it gives you out of a pinch. So we're going to go ahead and set that aside. Another important tool that you'll need when you're doing something like this is a nice heavy cast iron skillet. And what I like to do is I'll heat my skillet up. I'll get it nice and hot, and then I'll turn my flame down. So we're just going to let that go. I'm going to go ahead and get this pepper off my board real quick. I'm going to remove one of these steaks and put it on a paper towel here. Get this one out of the way. And now on our dish here, see all that moisture? So on this dish is where we're going to put our peppercorns. And we're going to gently push those into just one side of the meat. You can do two, but most of the time with a particular dish like this, you just want a nice seared peppercorn right on top. So I'm going to take some of the peppercorns I had. These are the ones I did ahead of time. We're just going to pour them onto the dish there. You can use any kind of meat that you would like. You do want it at least 12 ounces. Or if you're using beef tenderloin, maybe a good 8-ounce filet is a real nice one here. I don't know if you're familiar, but we just started our steak dinners at all the resorts. So I have a ton of New York strips on hand. And I love a nice New York. Personally, I like New York or ribeye over even filet because the filet has okay flavor, but it just tastes like beef. There's no real fat in it. It's real lean.
Chef, earlier you had mentioned using olive oil and the burn temperature of 200 to 60. Would avocado oil be a good oil to use?
Avocado has a much higher burning radius than olive oil. That's why some of the cooking classes or shows that you'll see, they'll start with olive oil, but that's because their pan is not super hot when you're trying to do a high temperature thing, so your protein doesn't stick or you're just doing some vegetables. And a lot of those cooking shows nowadays, they're actually using non-stick skillets. So that's another thing, is you don't have to worry about it sticking when you're even doing a cut of meat like this. That's not going to stick. But the downside when you're using something, doing beef, you kind of want to build the fond. All that flavor that you saw is you're not going to get it out of a non-stick skillet. So here we have our peppercorns nice and evenly. So I'm just going to put my New York strip right on top of there. Give it a nice push. We're going to salt the other side. And then when I flip it over, I'm going to put a little more kosher salt on top. You don't want just pepper. Of course, you want that salt in there. And then I'm going to dab so when I flip it over, my salt doesn't go anywhere. Give it a nice little dab. And that's what you want right there. That's going to develop such a lovely crust. So I'm going to go ahead and dump these in my dish over here. Wipe this off real quick. We're just going to let that rest there. And now we're going to come back to our pan. If you can see, the pan is definitely smoking. And this is where I'm going to turn it down a little bit. We know it's hot. We know it's not gonna stick when you start seeing your smoke. Now I'm gonna go ahead and start with some oil. So if you can see that. Now I'm gonna go ahead, when I put this cold meat in there, which is another, let me back up a little, let me turn that down. When you are doing something like this or any kind of roast, whatnot, you definitely wanna pull it out ahead of time, let it rest and come to room temperature. You're gonna get much better results with your meat. It's gonna cook so much more even. And then another important part is when you're done, letting it rest. So we're gonna go ahead and turn this back on. And because it's cast iron, it's gonna hold its heat very well. So I'm not too worried about it sticking or anything like that. So, and then when you're putting something like this in your saute pan, another good tip is always away from you. You never wanna put it up here and lay it down towards you. Always away from you. And that's how you'll avoid, you hear that nice sizzle? And it's gonna pick up its sizzle. Hear that? That's what you want to hear right there. We're going to set our dish off to the side. Okay, these are the rest of the ingredients I have for the foie. So I have a little, which is not in your recipe, I noticed, and I do apologize. Little shallots. I got my heavy cream, my cognac. Again, we're going to go ahead and smash a couple pieces of garlic. Whoops, don't let that get away. That's going to also just add so much flavor to this. Shallot, just like a baby onion. We're going to go ahead and do a diced shallot like this. I always treat it just like an onion. So I always like to cut it along this way. I leave my root on so everything stays held together. And we're just gonna go down this way. We're gonna, not quite a mince, but a nice dice. And then because it's a bigger shallot, we're gonna go ahead and go once across this way. Almost 90% through. You see I'm really close to my root. Now we're going to hold it all together with our fingers and curl your fingers so you don't cut your fingers. And we're just going to give that a nice dice. Doesn't have to be perfect. Doesn't have at all have to be perfect. Just as long as you're somewhat close to the same size. So let's go ahead and check our steak over here.
So you only put the peppercorns on one side.
On
not
one
both
side.
sides,
If you
okay.
really like pepper, go ahead and put it on both sides, but I recommend it is pretty strong, and then you're gonna have all these little peppers that fall off that abandon the steak in there. So I say you're pretty good there. And here's some fresh thyme and rosemary, and what we're actually gonna do, there's a technique called basting. Now, like when you baste your turkey, well, that is a little different. You're just kind of, you're going to do it. Let me turn the flame down just a little bit. I'm going to get a couple pads of butter. We're going to add this fresh thyme and rosemary into the pan once we get to that process. Okay, so we're just going to slice this up a little bit. It is already kind of softened, so
Chef, when you're cooking up the shallots, how many normally would you use per serving?
for this dish right here, probably one nice shallot. Like this was, so this is a little more. This I would use right here. I'm using 1.5 shallots. So this is the other half of what I just showed you, demonstrated on how to dice. So all this won't be used. Not here for this class. It won't be thrown away. Okay, so at this point, we're going to go ahead and hit it with some cognac. And then that's going to get a little fun. And I recommend when you're doing something like this, And I'm gonna finish with a little cognac also. But when you're doing this, you want to pull it away from the flame. That handle gets a little warm. Pull it away from the flame. This is really, really intense. So you're gonna want to reblaze again with your cognac. Now, that's absolutely perfect. If you have a gas stove at home, you don't want to do this because especially say straight from a bottle into your pan. You know what happens? Your bottle catches on fire and then you have real problems. So I'm going to light this with a stick lighter instead. What we're doing is it might not even light up now. And you don't want, it looks cool, but you don't want a flame up in your face all over the place. I keep looking up because I have a mirror and I really didn't want mirror. I think it's even going to light. I think we've already burned off the alcohol. So, and that's what you want. You just want to get rid of that alcohol. Okay. Now we're going to add our butter, our garlic. We're going to turn the flame down just a little. Our fresh herbs. And this is where you're going to add some more flavor to this. You'll hear the crackle of the fresh herbs.
Well, you guys can't smell it, but it smells delicious.
They're still working on smell-o-vision. You will be the first to know when we figure that one out. Okay, so when you're doing basting, let's see if I can get this a little closer. Turn my steak. So I'm going to push this to this side. And all those fresh herbs pile right on top. You're going to lean it towards you and get all that nice butter. See how that's all in the front right there? And that's what you're going to do. Is you'll lean it towards you. Not too long. You're going to baste a little, get some of that butter down in there. Right up on top. It's going to soak into that meat, give it great flavor. I got my nice big thing of garlic right there. Keep on basting that. Now, in the fine dining restaurants I've worked at, this is what you do with every meat. It's not just because it has peppercorns on there. Every meat. So imagine doing 250 covers at a time and having to make sure that you have the time to do this. If the chef on the other side sees you not doing it, guess what? You're redoing that dish.
And what kind of herbs were those again?
That was fresh thyme and rosemary. You can use whatever you like. Rosemary is very strong, so just be careful on how much rosemary you use. Fresh thyme is a little more delicate or not as pungent. And you can see the butter with the oil. It's just brown, okay? So you don't want it to turn black. You don't want your butter, because it has still the solids inside the butter. You don't want all that to turn black. So if you really want to watch your temperature, but that brown that you see right here, all that foamy brownness, that is your nutty flavor that you're going to get. And a lot of times, I'm going to turn it towards you. And you can see right along here, I don't know if you guys can, but right along here, I'm starting to see these little bubbles come out. That's the fat coming out. So that tells me that it's getting hot in the middle, and we're actually getting pretty close to a medium rare to rare, right as it is right now. If you want well done or that type of temperature, closer to well done, you just turn down your temperature way low and just let it roll. Just let it keep going. Or if you'd like, you have the option to slice it and then put it back in your pan and just keep basting it. But
Somebody else wanted to know if you could use oregano in there.
yeah, absolutely. Whatever the herbs are that you like. But rosemary and fresh thyme are my absolute favorites. I wouldn't add so many that you're not going to be able to distinguish what you actually put in there. So these two herbs do have a distinguishing, different flavor, and I have so little going in there that you'll be able to taste a little bit of each. It's just gonna give it a real nice earthy aroma. Okay, so at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and pull everything out. We're gonna put our steak off to the side. We're just gonna let that rest just like it is. I'm gonna discard this here. We're gonna drain all that fat off, okay? We're just gonna pour that off. Then we're gonna dab our pan on just a little bit to absorb some of that off of there. And now we're gonna hit it with some more of the cognac, the heavy cream. And if you can see that, you see how fast that deglazed? All the alcohol is burned off that fast because your pan was that hot. Now we're gonna hit it with a little more the shallot. Actually, I need some more cognac. I had another open bottle. Just a little more in there so we can actually. I'm gonna turn that all the way down so it doesn't do the same thing. Okay, so we have that there. Now we're gonna add our heavy cream to that. Then I'm going to come back to my peppercorns. We're going to just put a little tiny bit more in there. And I like to use the medley, peppercorn medley. You don't have to. You can just use your regular black peppercorn. Did you know pink peppercorn isn't really a peppercorn?
No.
And did you know the green peppercorn is just a raw pepper before it's been shelled? I'm gonna go ahead and just put that in there. This is gonna reduce and it's gonna thicken up. It's gonna be a really nice sauce. When I'm doing something like this for lots and lots of people, I'll use a modified starch to thicken or a cornstarch, sometimes a roux. So you see that, it's coming up, getting nice and bubbly. And then we're going to put it off to the side and let that rest. Then we're going to go, then we're going to do a little demonstration, quick demonstration on scallops. So we're going to do a little surf and turf for my workers to get to actually taste this food. I wish you were all here and were able to taste that. And when you're reducing stuff, you typically want to be able to reduce it by half or enough that it's going to coat the back of a spoon. And this is what they talk about, a pan sauce. Here is your pan sauce. And then you see here, when you lift your steak, you see all those juices? Don't let those go anywhere. Right back into the pool. Go. When this is done, I think it's going to be well roasted. I think we're going to go ahead and cut into it, and we'll finish this plate off with the scalloped potatoes, and then we'll move forward to the scallops. So that's getting there. So when you have a spoon, and we're going to check it real quick, you want to coat the back of the spoon. When you run your finger across and you notice it doesn't keep running down, it's called nappe. That means that your sauce is ready. So let me double check that one more time. So your sauce is ready. At that point, you're ready to go. But we are just going to put this off to the side. Pull these two sprigs out. Turn the flame off. We're just gonna let that rest for a minute. Now we're just gonna do a real quick plate up. Oh, I'm sorry. So I'm finishing this with a little pad of softened butter. That's just gonna really add a lot of flavor to it. You don't wanna add your butter though when it's all hot and bubbly like that, because it's just gonna break and then you have a broken sauce. Which if that does ever happen to you, all you have to do is add just 1 or 2 ice cubes to your hot sauce. It'll cool it down and it'll bring it right back together. It's a little trick that we learned when you're in the restaurant industry and you're getting nailed with 300 covers and chef says, "Where's that sauce?" and you accidentally break it. A couple ice cubes and there you go, chef. So you don't want to ruin the star of your show with that lovely peppercorn right there. You don't want to cover that up. So we're going to start with our sauce on the plate. Like you worked hard, you made sure it didn't burn, you made sure you had even browning, so you don't want to ruin that. So we're just going to go down a little bit on the plate.
This sure makes me appreciate what ordering a steak is all about.
Yeah,
I'm
right.
telling you.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of work, really. People
Yeah.
don't understand really the technique and the work that really goes into making a perfect dish. And a lot of places when you start and the chef wants to make sure you're on track and you know your menu and what goes on your plate, your chef will come in and say, "Keith, give me 3 perfect plates. It's your choice." So that means you pick 3 items off of the menu and you make them perfect plates. And what they're going to do at that time, you're going to put them in the window and they're going to take them out of your view and they're literally going to weigh. They'll weigh it. They'll examine it. Nope, you had too much onion, too much whatever the ingredients are, or you were a perfect plate is why it's called a perfect plate. Keith, you did a perfect plate. Thank you. All 3 of them were wonderful. And then at that time, you get a pat on your back. All right, and then when I do stuff like this, you can slice it straight down. I just feel it looks a lot nicer if you go to a little bias, and it makes it nice and tender too. So you're already getting ahead of the game on cutting it against the grain in a nice bias, and it's going to look really nice when you put it on the plate. And then what we do is I'll show you that center. So this is not going to turn up really well on the. But it's a nice medium to medium rare right through. We're going to transfer that to our plate. Which is another reason you want your meats to rest. You want your meat to rest. If you cut right into this and you put it on your plate, you're going to have blood all over the place. Here's an example. This is even before cutting it. That's just letting it rest. That's what would end up on your plate. And that's when the chef puts it back in the window and tells you to replate it. So we're just going to shingle this out just a little bit. You can slice this however you'd like to. Say you just want to do something like this for a little hors d'oeuvres and slice it thin and put little toothpicks and have your guests start off with an appetizer. Okay, now we're going to go into the scalloped potato. So we're going to rotate that and we're going to do the scalloped potato. So this is the same recipe. We did this earlier. You keep hearing me say it's going to thicken as it rests. Well, it thickened as it rests. You see a little bit of that juices, but that's what's going to make it nice and not dry when your guests eat it. That's part of the flavor there. It looks beautiful though. That's 15 minutes after at 350 degrees. I took it off. I let it brown for 15 minutes, and that's what you end up with. And so you could easily just put a pile of this on your plate, or you can do it really nice. And what I've done in the past is any of your cream of mushroom or your chicken noodle soup, save your cans. Cut the top and the bottom off, and it makes a ring mold. This is what we use in the fancier restaurants. And what we'll do is ahead of time, we're going to go ahead and smash right down in there. You're going to take a spatula, you reach in, smash right down in there. And this is all about the presentation now. You don't want to give them too much, and then you're going to transfer that right to your plate. Back side of your tongs. Slide it down. There you go. If it falls a little, it's going to look like an organized mess, so you're okay. Oh, so I went a little high on that one. So, and then we're going to have some sauteed veg we're going to finish the class off with. This kind of blows me away too. It's so amazing. It's an okay looking plate, and then you add just a little color to it, and it just pops out at you. Okay, so we're going to come back to this dish with the little sauteed vegetables at the end. We'll leave this dish right here for now, and then we can go ahead. Okay, now we're going to get started on some scallops. It's another fun thing to sear. I had somebody run their fries today, grabbing 4 scallops. At this point, it is a surprise. I didn't open the package. Let's see what we have. And again, this is where we're going to do a little basting also with the scallop. So again, just like the steak, you want to make sure that your product is nice and dry, but you don't want to push it all out. So we're just going to start with stacking these nicely. And then sometimes, let's see if these have any. Nope, they have already cleaned them up. So when you work with a scallop, I wish one of them had it. There's a yes, right here. Okay. So right here, there's a little connective tissue. That's what holds itself into its shell when it's a scallop. So you just want to kind of take that off. Kind of like your mussel has the little beard on it you want to pull off. There's a little, that's kind of, it's not pleasant to eat. So, all right, after getting a better look, I do have a little on each one. So you want to get rid of your connective tissue. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and pop these on our paper towel. Now scallops, boy, they cook super fast. It's almost, once you get the color on one side, you flip it over, done. And that's only because the proper way, let me say, the proper way to serve scallops is a nice medium, but medium rare is definitely preferred. It's not like a cut of beef where it's going to be bloody. It's just going to have a really nice salty flavor to it. And personally, I don't like to put black pepper on or any pepper on seafood. It's just a personal thing I've learned from some of the chefs I've worked with. You want salt, you want it to taste kind of like the ocean, not super salty, but you just want a little salt on there. So we're just gonna dab those dry. We're just gonna put just a little bit of salt. We're gonna heat up our saute pan. If you notice, I went to a nice little saute pan. You always want something, depending on the size that you're doing. You don't want it too big, you don't want it too small. My cast iron skillet. But I will salt both sides. I'll move it to another drier part of the paper towel. Again, you're going to want your pan to get smoking hot again. But I don't like to put my oil in until I know it's going to be pretty hot. I can feel my pan's pretty warm. I'm going to go ahead and put my oil in there. We're not pan frying. Pan frying, you would go about halfway up the product that you're doing. So you would bring your product pretty high up the side. We're just wanting to get a nice sear. And I didn't bring it with me, but one of the best things to use when you are working with seafood is they have a fish spatula, because it has little slants in the nose of it. It's just convenient to get it up underneath without ripping, shredding, or messing up your seafood. But I've done this a couple hundred times, so I think I'm okay with just using a pair of tongs. So I don't know if you guys can see, I just barely put my oil in. I'm starting to see a little smoke there. Now I'm going to take my scallop, like I said, and we're going to test it. Okay, no sticking. So we're good to go. And you don't want to put them right next to each other, so I'm going to scoot these over. Then I'm going to turn it down just a little bit. So you just want to spread them away from each other as opposed to that, because then it's just all the moisture is going to come out and start steaming them again. And a scallop, the most important thing is the nice crust. Gives a nice buttery flavor on the outside. They're going to have, it happens pretty quickly. And then when they're done again, kind of just because it's a scallop doesn't mean you don't want it to rest. So we're going to go ahead and place it back on the plate with a little paper towel and let them rest and let that. All right, so you see how fast that went? We're going to go ahead and give it a flip. Now we're going to be, those are gorgeous. That is an absolutely perfectly cooked or seared scallop. That's what you want. Okay, that's what you want. Now we're going to turn that flame down. And this is where we're going to add just a little bit of butter again. And, you know, I don't think we're going to mess with the herbs or anything. We want this to taste more like scallop. You don't want to mask it.
And Chef, what type of oil did you start out with?
This is canola oil. That's what I generally use is a canola oil. That's what we'll use in the kitchen here. Again, you see the brown in the butter? That's okay, but you don't want little black dots. If you went too far, you'll see black dots everywhere. So I'm going to turn it up just a tiny bit more. And we're going to go ahead. We're going to now scoop these together. And just ladle some of that lovely, nice butter on there. And that will continue to get a little more color. It'll fill in the gaps, but the flavor is going to be amazing. Again, 90% of people and chefs, medium rare to medium on a scallop, no more than that. It's going to get really chewy. I don't know if you've ever had overcooked shrimp. Same thing, super chewy. And that's about as much as you got to go. So super fast, super good. That's just another little level to your lovely dish that you're doing. So maybe you can see this now that it's rested. You have that really nice medium rare color. We're going to pull these out of here. See, the bottom's not getting a lot of color, but you don't want that. It's more about your show, the top. Just let it rest. Gordon Ramsay. Beautiful scallops. Beautiful scallops. There you go, guys. Now we're going to move on to a sauteed vegetable. Now we're going to use a little bit thinner pan. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this on a little bit lower. We're going to start warming this again. A little bit
15 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, that'd be super fast and perfect timing. So we're going to get our pan a little hot. And I'm just doing a really quick vegetable medley. But depending on the vegetables you do, you don't want to throw them all in the pan at the same time. So I have carrot, which is gonna take a little longer. The little baby carrots I just cut in half. They're gonna get wonderful color on the inside. And we'll flip it over, little cauliflower, little peppers. Just it's just gonna add a lot of color to your plate. And flavor. I mean, you know, yeah, I think it's gonna be pretty nice. So. And I won't be using all this, just enough for this one little dish here. So again, I don't know if you guys can hear that, but it's starting to get that sizzle sound. That's what you want every single time, just about cooking anything. Like I can't think of anything that I would cook that I don't want that to sound when you put it in a pan. So we're gonna flip these carrots over. And I start seeing a little bit of color, a little more color on there. And we're almost out of time. So it's starting to get very light color. So they're almost there. Which tongs? I'm actually gonna serve that with the 3 scallops. That way you don't hide all of your temperature. And it's proper. You always serve in 3s. You don't put 4s, you don't put, or I should say odd numbers, not always 3s. So here we are. Carrots, really nice roasted flavor. It's not just color right there, that's flavor. So we're gonna go ahead and flip our carrots over. I'm gonna add my cauliflower. We're gonna saute that for a minute, and you don't have to, but I do. I always finish my vegetables with butter. Butter, salt, and pepper. And if y'all aren't used to sauteing, so when you saute, it's all on the wrist. And I tell people you can practice with sugar or salt directly in your pan or a piece of toast. It's all on the wrist. So you go forward and then back, forward and then back. And the open kitchens I've worked in, the chef loves it when you're doing pasta dishes. And you have your pan and you come over and you're tossing it up in the air and you're catching everything. It's just a real show for the guests when they're sitting out in the dining room. Okay, now we're gonna go ahead in with our bell pepper. I'm gonna saute that just for a minute. I'm gonna add actually a little bit of clarified butter too. Salt and pepper. A pat of our little garlic there. And I think we're just about out of time and almost done with this class. My next one is cooking or using knife skills. How to use all your knives in your butcher block. Another one, again, it's all about resting and plate presentation. So I did finish this with a lot of butter, but in a restaurant, you would never just use your pan. This is something I learned. We used to have people, it's called pan plating. You're just dumping it. No. You don't want all that oil and everything to mess up the beautiful work down there. So you just want to gently get everything out of your pan. And here you can do an organized mess also. We'll just let it rest. It's going to go up in a hot heating window. They call it the pass. and you will literally let it rest, and then we will take the time and we will weave the carrots in and out and make it look really, really pretty. So I don't know if anybody here or anybody watching has really eaten at a lot of fine dining restaurants. I'm sure at one point you have, but it really takes time. It takes patience to really do really good food and really nice presentation. It seriously does. So appreciate that when you go out to eat, you know, at any restaurant, but more particularly a really nice fine dining restaurant. Well, I think that finishes our show for today. Look forward to our next one. It's how to use all your knives and what all your knives in your butcher block is for, your paring knife, your bread knife, your slicers, your chef knife, what the differences are. And forward to how to sharpen them. I can go over how to use the steel properly, how to use the steel safely. There's a couple different ways you can do that. In my kitchen, I have a professional belt type of sharpener.
Thanks so much.
Are we all?
Yeah, we're great.
Oh, good.
Bye, everyone. We'll see you on